Alrighty, my friends, today we are breaking down a hot topic that has been stirring up quite a bit of buzz in our online creative industry, and that is the United States Federal Trade Commission's lawsuit against Adobe, and then Adobe's really vague terms and conditions that came out earlier this month. So the FTC has recently accused Adobe of deceptive practices related to their subscription plans, and they've alleged that the company has misled us as their customers about terms and conditions, making it tough to cancel or modify their plans under Adobe. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to unpack the key points of the lawsuit. I also want to discuss kind of broader consumer impact here and then explore the implications of what the FTC has been doing recently on cracking down on misleading subscription practices. Plus, I also want to take a closer look at Adobe's recent changes to their terms and conditions that came out on June 18th. Those had previously been updated at the beginning of June, and Adobe came and asked everybody to agree to their updated terms and conditions, but that sparked a lot of concern within the creative community because a lot of those terms and conditions were extremely unclear. It kind of blew up on TikTok. It blew up a little bit on Instagram Reels, and people were not happy with their use. It kind of seemed to be that Adobe had full control over the content that you put on their platform. Then this week on June 18th, they updated those terms and conditions and they really broke it down. They had an attorney come on, their in-house counsel, and explain what was going on with their terms and conditions. Now, every single section has like a breakdown bubble on what that section means in layperson terms, so you don't have to be a lawyer to understand it. So really, let's go over what all this means for you, whether you're a consumer, a creative professional, or just someone curious about the tech industry's latest shakeup. Hey there, I'm Paige Griffith, your host and an attorney for small business owners. I help online businesses and creatives get legally legit in no time. This podcast is all about the legal and the Paige behind it. I'll break down and simplify legal talk while providing practical business guidance every step of the way. And after over a decade in the entrepreneur space and becoming a mother, I'll also be sprinkling in tips for running a business and giving you a glimpse behind the scenes of what life's really like. As a gentle reminder and disclaimer, I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. So be sure to seek legal counsel for personalized advice. Welcome to the Legal Paige Podcast. All right, I first want to break down the FTC lawsuit. So on June 17th, this was the day before their updated terms and conditions were going to go out. I was like, oh, Adobe's getting slammed this week. The U.S. Justice Department and then the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, filed a lawsuit against Adobe. We're talking Monday, June 17th. They alleged that the company engaged in deceptive practices regarding its subscription plans. They claim that Adobe misled customers about the terms and conditions of their subscriptions. They made it extremely difficult for any user to cancel or modify their plans. And ultimately, they were saying that this was violating the FTC's Restore Online Shoppers Confidence Act, and that is ROSCA for short, and an acronym. As the government lawsuit notes, Adobe's subscription revenue actually has nearly doubled in recent years. So in 2019, Adobe earned $7.71 billion in subscription-based revenue. By 2023, their revenue, that subscription-based revenue, had accounted for $14.2 billion of the company's $19.4 billion in total annual revenue. I would probably liken a lot of that to the online world going more and more online, post-2020, post-pandemic, and of course, a lot of creatives getting into more of the creative industry, which Adobe's platforms serve in 2020 and post-2020. So that's not necessarily a huge surprise to me, but when you double your subscription-based revenue in that short period of time, of course, the FTC is going to look more closely at you. Let's go over some key points from the lawsuit. First, misleading practices. Adobe really is accused of not adequately disclosing the terms of its subscription services, particularly this automatic renewal of their conditions and cancellation process. So they use like fine print and inconspicuous hyperlinks. I've talked about this a lot on the podcast. Legally speaking, you always want to bold or make conspicuous in larger font your print or your terms and conditions that are really applicable to your customers or consumers, and you don't want to hide important information. And here the FTC is blanketly stating across the board, stop hiding important information, especially if you're a subscription-based model. And they're saying that Adobe included information about a significant early termination fee that customers could be charged when they cancel their subscriptions early. And this was all kind of, really small fine print, not hyperlinked correctly. So misleading practices here. That is really key point number one. Essentially what it means to you, don't have misleading practices in your consumer contracts, in digital product purchase and use agreements, in, of course, your website terms and conditions, and really all of the terms and conditions that your customers or clients may sign with you. Make things as conspicuous as possible. Don't hide the ball. Number two, consumer harm. The FTC argues that these practices have caused significant harm to consumers who really may have unknowingly continued paying for subscriptions that they really no longer wanted or needed. The complaint specifically alleged that Adobe had further violated ROSCA by failing to provide consumers with a simple mechanism to cancel reoccurring online subscriptions. And I myself have experienced this with Adobe, where you go into their platform and you're trying to get to your account, and then you're trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I actually cancel this service or put it on pause or ask to reduce the services? I know Adobe has a cloud, and then maybe you're not wanting to have full access to the cloud and all of their apps, but maybe reduce to only have a couple apps. When they make it extremely difficult to do that, the FTC doesn't like it. And this is becoming more commonplace now, where these huge companies making billions and billions of dollars are deceptively keeping people in subscriptions and monthly subscriptions when they don't want to be. And you have to make the cancellation process simple, or the FTC isn't going to like it. So what can we take away here on number two, key point, consumer harm? Really us. I think us as consumers, we have the ability to work with the FTC. We have the ability to come together as a community, especially as creatives, and be like, this is not okay. This is not working for us. Adobe's not playing ball with us. And I think they had enough complaints here, and you can submit complaints to the FTC. And if they get enough of them, they're going to take note. And they're probably going to audit these companies like they did here, and then probably file lawsuits. So then the legal action happened. So the lawsuit really is seeking to address these deceptive practices. They're going against big fish, big dogs in the industry. That's why they are particularly gunning for Adobe here. They want them to provide more clear and transparent information to its customers about subscription terms, including how to cancel them without undue difficulty. Now, Adobe said that it's going to fight this lawsuit. They say that their subscription services are really convenient and flexible and cost effective. I don't really think they're super cost effective. They've increased the cost substantially. When I was a photographer back in the day, you could just have the yearly fee, and it was so much less than this $39.99 and $59.99 subscription fee a month. I mean, we're talking maybe it was $100 a year, maybe $150, $199. I don't know. Reach out to me. Let me know where you've been in this trajectory over the past decade of paying for Adobe services, because I feel like they're consistently getting more and more expensive. And I use them. I use Adobe all the time, every single day in my business. So it's hard for me to want to opt out because it's so convenient for me to be able to use. But the cost effectiveness is certainly not there. I think it's hilarious that Adobe is saying that it is. And they're saying that they do allow their users to choose a plan that fits their needs, timeline, and budget. But as the FTC is claiming, consumers don't feel that way. And the FTC isn't going to go up against Adobe if they don't have a lot of evidence to support their claims in federal court. Adobe, though, is saying that their priority is always to ensure that their customers have a positive experience. We're going to get into that here with their updated terms and conditions. And I think Adobe is trying to put their best foot forward. But again, they're a behemoth. It's easy for the FTC and the federal government to go against a large, huge corporate business like this. especially if it's preying on small businesses. And the FTC is obviously here to support small business owners. And all of us, probably 99% of you that are listening to this podcast today, use Adobe in some way, shape, or form. So we're going to certainly keep you up to date on what is happening with this lawsuit. I honestly just think that the FTC really here is going against Adobe because it's part of this broader crackdown on companies using misleading subscription services. The Justice Department has even said that it is committed to stopping companies and their executives from preying on consumers who sign up for online subscriptions by hiding key terms and making cancellations like truly just a massive obstacle course. We don't want that as consumers. We've honestly seen so many FTC lawsuits this year focusing on misleading its consumers, and they're cracking down on this nationwide with very large companies. They really just have a very low tolerance for these types of scenarios. I recently even had someone pop into my DMs and share about some FTC lawsuits against big online coaches and other lawsuits that they've been filing regarding misleading customers of coaching programs. And you know, those kind of get rich quick schemes, you can make $10,000 as an online coach kind of thing. I'm going to talk about that in a follow-up episode. So please stay tuned on this podcast and subscribe so that you get immediate access to that next episode. So ultimately, that is what happened with the lawsuit. This is coming off the brink of Adobe getting major heat from consumers and particularly the creative industry regarding their terms and conditions. And I'm going to get into that right now. So let's recap here. Adobe released general terms and conditions in February of 2024 that really caused much of the creative industry so much concern. We all weren't sure how this was going to play out. But then in early June, Adobe goes and just asks users to accept these terms to use their software. They're like, by continuing on using our software, you agree to our new terms of service. And it was not good. The terms of service were honestly atrocious. And they claimed the right to access, to use, and even sub-license your content created with their software. This really applied to anything that you uploaded to their cloud. It had all of us as creative professionals worried, especially say if you're working under a strict NDA and you're using, say, Adobe Lightroom to edit your photos. You have raw photos on there. You own the copyright to those photos, but then you're just sharing them for a personal license to use with your clients. But then they've had you sign strict NDAs, say they're government professionals or celebrities. But now Adobe has access to all of these. That was totally unclear in their terms and conditions. And creatives were like, peace, Adobe. We don't like this. This isn't cool. We own our content, not you. Seriously, just imagine working on a confidential project and having Adobe have access to it without explicit consent. Nobody wants that. Nobody likes it. And creatives were not happy about it. So in response to all of these concerns, and they had bad publicity online about it, Adobe then released a statement trying to clarify these changes. And they were really trying to let users know that a version of the new terms would be released on June 18th. So fast forward to last week, Adobe did keep their word. And on June 18th, they released new terms along with an explanation video from their in-house counsel that talked exactly about how they changed their terms and why. And almost every section of the new terms and conditions has a summary box that now explains exactly what each section means, meaning you don't need to be an attorney to understand what their new terms are saying. I really liked this approach. I thought, again, from an attorney's perspective, this was refreshing. No terms and conditions have boxes like this in layperson speak where it's like, this is what this section means and why. So to me, I like this. I like that they are saying, okay, these are the changes. Let's break these down. This is how it's going to affect you as a creative using our Adobe software. I think that when I was going through the terms and conditions and pulled it up on June 18th, I could easily understand it. But then when I read the summary boxes, I feel like they dumbed it down to 6th through 8th grade lingo. And that's really what you want. You want anyone to be able to understand what they're agreeing to. I mean, we all open PDFs using Adobe software, and a lot of people have no knowledge whatsoever of how to understand a clause in a contract, what terms and conditions even are. I think we all mindlessly scroll and accept terms and conditions every single day online. So because they needed to really clarify these, the bubble summary box breakdown was a wise decision from my perspective on Adobe's, side of things. Adobe also had really good explanation videos from their in-house counsel. They were a little bit scripted, but I thought they did a good job of breaking down, okay, these are the sections that you all didn't like. We revised them. We made it even more clear what we do and don't do. So I want to break this down a little bit. Let's talk about access to user content in Adobe's terms and conditions. So the initial terms from Adobe mentioned that they had access to your content automatically and manually, which understandably raised so many eyebrows. We're all wondering, why would Adobe manually access our work? It's our content. We own it. So the updated terms detailed in section 2.2, if you just go and type into Google Adobe's new terms and conditions, scroll down to section 2.2, and they really shed some much needed light on this. So Adobe now explains that they access your content only to operate their systems and check for illegal content like child pornography. So really here, they do have access to it. They're going to operate whatever platform you're on Adobe. Say you're using Photoshop. They're saying, well, we need access to your content so that we can do all of the necessary things that you're doing in Photoshop and operation, for operational purposes. The scanning, though, for content like child pornography, that gives me a little bit of concern. I feel like there's a little bit of AI going on there. I'll get to that in a second. But then they also explain that they're really only using your content for analytics or to approve generative AI if you explicitly opt in. And this is that new beta program in Photoshop where it's saying, hey, do you want to use generative AI? You want to say to Adobe, hey, generate some light blue sky with puffy clouds. Maybe your sky is all blown out in your photograph and you're trying to change the raw and adapt that file a little bit. Adobe, it's mind-blowing what this generative AI can do. I've used it. I think it's fascinating. But I even opted in as a lawyer being like, they have access to this. I know they have access to this. So again, what they're trying to do here is clarify it's totally optional. It's not mandatory at all. I agree with them. I had to personally opt in and voluntarily opt in. So good step forward here. They're clarifying, yes, we need to use this for generative AI, but you can opt out if you want to by not voluntarily opting in. Hopefully you catch my drift here. All right, ownership of user content. So previously it was unclear whether submitting your content really gave Adobe free rein to use it however they wanted. And now the new terms clear that up. They say the content is yours, period. By using Adobe services, you are simply agreeing to a limited license so that they can restore or process your content in their cloud, making it easy for you to share it with friends and family, etc. So it sounds like they're using it again for their software purposes, specifically storing in their cloud. It's a limited license to use, and that the content itself is yours still. It's just like a shareable thing on their cloud for processing your content. Still a little concerning here that there's a limited license to store, process the content on their cloud. I don't love that because it wasn't explicit on exactly what would happen if the cloud got hacked. I mean, there's so many concerns for us as a creative, but I think this was helpful. It was helpful for everyone to understand the content is ours, but Adobe gets this license to store and process our content if we opt into their cloud. Adobe also made it crystal clear that they're not going to use your content for advertising or AI training. And we all really wanted this so that they wouldn't train AI using their work. But it's AI, kind of the Wild West. Nobody really knows who's training AI using what content. Adobe is saying that they're not doing it. I would not be surprised in a couple of years if there's some new lawsuits coming out that there's some back end way of AI getting content and using it for training purposes. but who am I to know? I'm a little bit skeptical of AI in terms of all of these platforms having so much access to people's faces and privacy and likeness and children's photos. It makes me a little bit like unsure of what's going to happen in 2, 3, 5 years once we get more legal precedent on how AI is okay to be used in everyday practice and how generative AI may need to change to comply with, consumer protection laws. Another significant change is that Adobe now lets you opt out of content analysis for product improvement. So unlike other companies that use your data for system improvements without you knowing, Adobe is offering you a way to opt out without losing access to any features. So personally, I like that part. I think it was really good for all of us creatives. So there's the rundown. My legal take here. The original terms and conditions that Adobe had were a confusing mess for creatives, didn't like them whatsoever, and neither did you. I'm sure you're nodding your head listening to this. But thankfully, the new version released on June 18th does a much better job. I don't think it does a perfect job. I think the AI portion of it is still a little wonky, and nobody really knows what's going on with the generative AI and training of AI. Adobe saying, no, we don't use it. I do think they're doing a better job of really putting forth an effort to explain their terms and conditions and what each section means. That's something a lot of companies don't do. So Adobe, I'm clapping at you as an attorney. You're doing a good job. You're setting a good precedent in terms of, hey, we're a big company. We've got in-house counsel. We need to do our customers solid. I mean, they just got hit with an FTC lawsuit. So of course they're going to do videos. It was behooving them to go in there and change all of their terms and conditions, make them not just one, Times New Roman 12, very inconspicuous mess of legal jargon. They're breaking things down. They're making bubbles. They're saying, here's what this means. I like that. I think all companies, especially big corporations that have subscription services like this, should follow suit. As a creative, personally, I now do feel more secure knowing my content won't be used by Adobe in all of the respects that they're saying, especially their AI platforms, without my consent. I have voluntarily opted in. You don't have to. And as AI technology continues to grow, I think it's crucial for companies to be transparent about how they use their content. I said that from the beginning. I have been, preaching from this hilltop on notice, conspicuous terms regarding any AI technology you use as a service provider, an AI disclaimer clause for your contracts and website terms and conditions. That kind of thing will help alert your clients that you're going to be using even some type of AI in your work. And now that, again, AI is just a daily occurrence for a lot of us as photographers and videographers and graphic designers and creatives alike, this is a good example for us to set for those that are following us, that we're not just going to use AI and not tell our clients about it. We are going to tell them. I think this is a very simple clause that you can put in your client contracts. I think it's also something that you should put on your website terms and conditions and just say, hey, we use AI platforms to help us out with our blogs, to do XYZ, to check for human error, what have you. Disclaimers and putting people on notice is going to serve you in a legal realm into the future much better than not doing anything at all. And then lastly, I do want to say this. I know some creatives are also sourcing other alternative softwares to use besides Adobe to eliminate or honestly at least curtail some of the dependency that we have on Adobe, like Photoshop and Lightroom alternatives as photographers. So you can certainly reach out. You can reach out on the Legal Page community on Facebook. You can reach out in your local photography group on what other softwares are there besides Adobe. What should I be using? I know a lot of bigger photographer, videography coaches in the industry only use Photoshop and Lightroom, and those are the tutorials that we all have. Those are the easiest platforms to edit on. So I think it's going to be hard pressed for us as creatives to want to jump ship or fully jump ship. Maybe we're just like dipping our toe on the other ship and seeing what it's like. But I think it would be wise for us to look at the full breadth of other platforms out there and see if maybe there's something that's not using AI as much as Adobe is right now. But again, I also want to say they are updating their terms and conditions. They've done a good job. I think this could go both ways here. I think a lot of us don't like Adobe because of what's happened. Now they're under, a legal scope federally with this lawsuit, but they're also doing things for their consumers, such as making things more conspicuous and understandable with their terms and conditions. Really, it's up to you, right? How you run your business is up to you. I just want to give you the legal information here, and then you can move forward with a better education and a better knowledge base on what this platform is actually doing with my content. Now that wraps up today's episode, and we've covered a lot of ground from the FTC's lawsuit against Adobe to the company's revamped terms and conditions. It's really clear here that transparency and consumer protection are honestly more critical than ever in our subscription-driven world and a creative world where we're using platforms with AI practices up the wazoo. As Adobe faces the heat, it's a reminder for all of us to keep tech companies in check and keep them from consumers' mistrust. Thanks again, my friend, for joining us on this episode. Please remember to subscribe to the Legal Paige podcast for more legal insights and updates on just our ever-evolving tech landscape right now. If you found this episode helpful, please leave me a review and then share it with your friends on social. I would love to hear your feedback. Until next time, keep questioning, stay informed, and be legally legit. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. Be sure to visit thelegalpage.com for contract templates, blogs, YouTube videos, and additional legal resources. If you haven't already, head over to iTunes and leave me a review and rating. It truly means so much to me to hear your feedback and inspires me to continue creating podcast content. Also, I want to personally invite you to my free Facebook group at tlpfacebook.com, where you will get access to me, my legal team, and thousands of other entrepreneurs in there for unlimited business and legal Q&A. Until next time, my friend.